She cornered the Secretary of State with one question that cut through all the politics. Where in the Constitution does he get the power to silence free speech? And his answer sparked a clash that could redefine your rights. Don't miss the end.
Exactly, in fact, what happened. The State Department wrote a memo concluding that you did not have sufficient grounds to revoke Ms. Ostrich's visa. There was no evidence showing that she'd engaged in any activities that were a threat to national security. And in fact, in May, a federal court ordered Ms. Ostrich's release from detention, noting that the sole basis for the government's detention appeared to be the fact that she co-authored this opinion piece in the Tufts newspaper in March of 2024. Where in the Constitution does it say that the Secretary of State can override the First Amendment protections of free speech? Is there a footnote that I missed somewhere?
There's no constitutional right to a student visa.
So, but is there a constitutional right? Does it say somewhere that Marco Rubio gets to determine which speech is appropriate and revoke student visas based on what you think constitutes free speech?
There's a statute that says the Secretary of State gets to determine whether someone is a threat. We deny visas every day all over the world.
Do you think that the Immigration and Nationality Act trumps the Constitution of the United States, Mr. Secretary?
Well, Congress can always change the law if you want, but I'm telling you,
Mr.
while I have the authority, I will continue to revoke the visas of these people that come here to tear this country apart.
You said that, Mr. Secretary. Let me reclaim my time, because you are talking about revoking student visas based on what somebody says. And that means that you are trumping the legal supreme court, the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution of the United States.
No one has a right to a student visa.
Mr. Rubio, why did the administration need to use masked, armed, unidentified agents to whisk somebody off the street and deny her counsel for almost 24 hours after her arrest?
Well, you'll have to ask the agencies that did that work. I'm not responsible for that. I'm responsible for revoking the visas of these people that come to tear this country
Rubio,
apart.
I'm talking about this particular case where you revoked the student visa of a Turkish citizen who was a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that you didn't like. And suddenly you allowed for masked men to whisk her off the street. And you have multiple jobs, apparently. You're the national security advisor as well. So don't tell me it's not your job. Who snatches her off the street?
We don't do the snatching, but I can tell you we do the visa revocations.
Let me ask you about the national security consequences of people, masked men on the streets, snatching people off the streets. If these are legitimate law enforcement agents carrying out proper arrests, why are they hiding their identities?
Because then radical crazies will try to hurt them.
So you think that U.S. agents who have almost always gone without face coverings, even when they're arresting some of the country's most dangerous criminals, suddenly have so much to fear from a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that they need to be masked? Is that
that law student was a guest in the United States on a student visa. No one's entitled to a student visa.
So you revoked her student visa based on an op-ed which trumps the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution.
Someone's coming up here to stir up problems on our campus. We're going to revoke their visa.
She didn't do any of that. She wrote an op-ed. She wrote an op-ed, and I'm talking to you about her particular case.
Claims and your claims. Those are not the facts.
Reclaiming my time, you revoked her student visa because she wrote an op-ed.
Would you revoke? We're going to do more.
I have another question for you. Would you revoke the visa of someone in the United States who published claims that, quote, Jews are an untrustworthy and dangerous group? Yes or no?
We will revoke the visa of anyone who's in this country as a guest who's here to stir up trouble.
Are you going to revoke the visa of somebody who made that?
Send me the case. I'll look at it. I'm looking to get crazy people out of our country.
It's not just about revoking. You actually, Secretary Rubio, excuse me, reclaiming my time. Can you explain to me why the Trump administration granted refugee status to Charles Kleinhaus, the white Afrikaner who tweeted that exact statement that I just said? There's the case.
That's not a visa.
You who granted that person to enter the United States. That's a totally different process.
That's someone that applied here through a totally different process. Student visas are a privilege.
Secretary Rubio,
deny them all the time and we'll revoke them.
You revoked a visa based on an op-ed, and then you allowed for masked men to snatch somebody off the street.
Your time is expired.
That's your claim. That's not accurate.
Recognized ranking.
What unfolded in that hearing was more than a policy dispute. It was a constitutional showdown in real time. Representative Jayapal did not just question Secretary Rubio. She dismantled the logic behind his actions piece by piece, starting with the revocation of a graduate student's visa over a single op-ed. She layered fact after fact: the federal court's ruling ordering her release, the internal State Department memo saying there was no threat to national security, and the simple truth that this was about words, not violence. When she pressed him on where in the Constitution he found the authority to override the First Amendment, Rubio leaned on statutory power, sidestepping the deeper issue of whether the Immigration and Nationality Act could or should trump the supreme law of the land. The clash intensified when she called out the use of masked armed agents to snatch the student off the street, forcing Rubio to admit that, while he approved the visa revocation, he distanced himself from the arrest itself. But her questions kept drawing the line back to the same point. This was not about immigration control, it was about punishing speech. Her hypothetical about anti-Semitic speech cornered him into admitting he would revoke visas in some cases. Yet she quickly exposed an apparent double standard by pointing to a white South African granted refugee status despite making that exact claim. The tension in the room was electric, not because of raised voices, but because of the collision between power and principle, authority and accountability. Jayapal's time may have run out, but the questions she raised still hang in the air. Can the U.S. government revoke someone's right to be here based solely on what they write? And if so, what does that mean for the very freedoms America claims to defend? For those watching, the exchange was a rare moment when political theater turned into a deeper reflection on the fragility of rights and why they depend not just on the laws we write, but on the people we trust to uphold them. Don't miss the end, because this isn't just about one case. It's about whether free speech is truly free when power decides who gets to speak.